updates after these preliminary items. After these preliminary items, we'll start with updates, and then two kind of non-technical topics, more process kind of topics. Operation and maintenance. So EPA will lead off with what it means to move into what they're beginning to call operation and maintenance. What does that mean? How do things change, if at all? We'll give plenty of time in there for question and answer and discussion and with clarification on all of what that might mean. And then second, CAG agenda topics. So there was a decision recently when EPA took a look at the agenda and made the decision to send only Meg and me because, I'm not going to say because, to only send the two of us. So the question is, what topics would lead EPA to say, well, this is not a meeting where they have to bring the technical team, et cetera, et cetera. And then similarly, a question for CDPHE, because there has been some discussion over the last couple of meetings about which topics make sense here, which topics make sense in other public involvement venues, which communication is going to a group, not this one, but to other parts of the community for different reasons that are not attached to Lowry Landfill. So the question is, what does that mean in terms of just agenda topics, what's in, what doesn't make sense to be in, and what does that mean for implication, what does that imply for participation of the agencies themselves? So some talk around agenda building and process in that sense. And then we will be done. So with that, let me just move to the updates and see if EPA has any that are not in tonight's topics that you just simply want to make by way of announcement or update before we turn to Bonnie to do the same.
I just have a quick one. I'll hand it over to Linda after that, but you might have seen that yesterday I sent out an email with the first site status report, a link to the site status report. And that actually came right around the time that CDPHE sent out their email with a list of links of resources as well. So you can actually find that site status report in both of those emails. I think, was it Shannon? Was it you that sent that? Okay. Yeah. Okay, so you can look for an email from me from yesterday, April 20th, with the link to the site status report, which can now be found online and is also linked on the Superfund site web page. That's all I have personally. Linda, did you have anything?
No, that was what I was going to mention, that the site status report came out, which is also called the Remedial Action and Operations and Maintenance Status Report. And it was for the second half of 2021.
Okay. Bonnie, let me give it to you for updates from the CAG, and then we'll see if any others have announcements or updates that that can be handled in this part of the agenda.
Okay. Thank you, Michael. Our updates are as follows. We feel that this CAG is a valuable tool for communication between the agencies, the county, cities, and community. If we cannot have the discussion at this table, it becomes necessary to find another venue. The CAG would prefer to have our discussions at this table. However, as the EPA community involvement representative said to me during our last agenda planning meeting, and these are not those direct words, if you aren't satisfied with how things are being addressed here, maybe you need to find another venue. And we have. On March 30th, 2022, Public Employees for Environmental Regulation, or PEER, and Bonnie Rader on behalf of the CAG held a joint press release in which we released the information that PFAS may exist in the DADS and the Superfund site. We know from the date from CDPHE that PFAS, the data from CDPHE, that PFAS exists in the RCRA facility. On April 6, 2022, the CAG and peer representatives met with CDPHE management to discuss the press release. It was a very successful meeting which culminated in agreement that there was a discrepancy in some of the PFAS numbers in the press release. We were not aware that CDPHE had already converted the data. Peer and the CAG agreed to correct those numbers and send out a corrected press release. This included peer experts reviewing the data at CDPHE and making the appropriate changes. On April 13th, the CAG and peer released a press release with the corrected PFAS numbers. We understand that EPA believes they have no obligation to continue their efforts on this CAG or at the Lowry landfill site, particularly as regards PFAS investigation, because there are no MCLs set by EPA under CERCLA. However, it's our opinion that until the MCL is set, the 1995 explanation of significant differences is the guideline. EPA is currently conducting studies on PFAS technologies and health effects of PFAS. Doesn't it make sense that the EPA continue to do their obligation to assist the public in understanding the possibilities to address their site issues, have teaching moments with the CAG, and perhaps work together to come to agreement that once the MCL is set, we can have a work plan in place with a planned pilot testing to determine to be available technologies to make in place where CERCLA does have a number. We also believe that it's important that we have EPA available to guide us in future studies. The CAG did also send out a notice to the responsible parties, Denver Waste Management Trust and their attorneys, talking about the problems with the Lowry landfill Superfund site, 73 pits having no lining underneath those pits. And yet we have fracking and deep well injection plans with no plan to monitor underneath those sites. So going forward, the CAG has met with the members of the Endocrine Society. We plan to have a presentation from the doctors before the CAG. And the CAG has been contacted about various technologies that treat destroyed dioxin and PFAS. And we will have presentations on them. So we're looking forward to tonight's meeting, which tells us what EPA will or will not accept as discussable, if that's a word, subjects to have. And we would like to see that the EPA is supportive of these efforts. So that's our update.
So Bonnie, can I start with a question that others may have as well? You suggest that there's a new venue, a new group, a new setting. Is there a name, a membership, a thing, different meeting time?
No.
Not sure what you meant.
No, it's just that if EPA determines that this CAG is not the proper forum, we intend to move forward anyway.
Yeah, so topics that don't come here or ultimately don't get on the agenda or that are not here for whatever reason, you're going to take those up elsewhere is the idea.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Did that raise questions for others that need to be clarified before we move to the agenda items, which kind of go directly at this anyway? Should we just move to them? Any CDPHE update? Any other updates from any of the other governmental bodies or?
Just a quick update from us. We are still in the process of trying to hire the replacement for Dustin McNeil. And we have done interviews. We hope to have somebody on board next month sometime, and we'll keep you posted.
Okay. All righty. So then let's move to the agenda in chief. So again, it's in the chat. Operation and maintenance. So let me give the floor to Meg, to Linda, to the EPA team to really talk about and maybe give some reference to the site status report and its reference to operation and maintenance. So help the group really understand what that means, and how you see that phrase, operation and maintenance.
I will let Linda take over. Go ahead, Linda.
So as we had talked about before, there is a Superfund process that's outlined in CERCLA, and there's steps to it once the site gets put on the national priorities list. After we come up with our remedial investigation and what the cleanup plan is going to be, we go through design, and then we go through remedial action. And remedial action is where we put the remedy components in place. So the slurry wall, the cap, the drainage system, the water treatment plant, those are all considered remedy components. Those were all put into place and completed in 2006. So then the next step after that is operations and maintenance. So the site has been in operations and maintenance since 2006. And the site status reports have been coming out since then. In 2017, in our 5-year review, there were many recommendations and issues. So many projects were initiated to resolve those, and you all have been a big part in going through that information and doing the evaluations and completing the last 5-year review, which happened in January. That 5-year review found that there weren't any issues and recommendations, that the remedy was operating as intended. So we went back to how we were between 2006 and 2017. So Shannon, can I share my screen?
You should be able to.
Okay. So let's see. As Meg mentioned, the site status report, or also known as the remedial action and operations and maintenance status report. And I just want to make sure, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Is on the EPA website, and CDPHE and EPA have sent links to it to the CAG members. This report is rather large and has a lot of appendices. So if there's an appendices that you would like to see that isn't available on there, right now my record center is busy getting the other appendices up. Bonnie has a hard copy of this report. I hope you do, Bonnie. They usually send it to your home if you want to look at a paper copy. And I can go through a little bit on what's in this report. So there's many sections. The introduction, they go through what has happened at the water treatment plant over the last 6 months, what waste was generated and where it went, and then the groundwater monitoring, which includes the 1,4-dioxane plume. At the site, they pretty much sample every day to get the data to complete this report. The landfill gas remedy and stormwater, the cap, how that's being monitored, and any problems. Lots of tables and figures in here. I'm going to go down to, there is an executive summary in this report. It's several pages long. I'm not going to go through this at this time. And let's see. In the introduction section, it talks about all the operations and maintenance manuals and plans that are followed to create this in their most recent version. So if you want to go through this report in more detail, we can do it in the May meeting. And I can have the work sending defendants go through it line by line, and you can get any questions that you have ready for May, and we can talk about it in May if you'd like.
Wow, very nice.
Okay,
Um,
Linda Moore? I'm gonna cut you off.
Yeah. Did anyone have any questions?
So Linda, this is Bonnie Rader, and you're saying that we can talk about this and the executive summary in May. Is that what you're offering?
If you would like, yeah, we would be happy to.
Very good. We're very appreciative of that. We have a few questions.
So Bonnie, do you think that makes sense for May? And other CAG members
Yes.
feel free. Well,
Yes, very much so. Particularly the executive summary, that would be excellent. Thank you.
questions in the moment? John, you got your mic on. Don't know if that's on purpose. So you can jump in, or feel free if you do.
I'm sorry, Michael, you were breaking up for me. Can you tell me what you just said?
Yeah, I just saw that John's mic was active, and wondered if that was on purpose. He was ready to ask a question. So,
Okay, thank you.
yep. So are there questions about that, about this posture from 06 to 17, and then the work through of the 5-year review issues in the 2017 5-year review, and now the return to that status that existed between 06 and 17? Good. Okay, that puts us a solid hour ahead. Okay, so unless there are, then let's turn to something that I teed up with the agenda review, but that Bonnie really made reference to in her update, which is the necessity to be on the same page about what is a Lowry Landfill Community Advisory Group, the Lowry Landfill Superfund Community Advisory Group topic, and what should be in this venue, and what ought to be elsewhere. So I'm going to open the floor. EPA, CDPHE, feel free to offer up your observations about where you see those lines and how you see that working. But CAG members as well, feel free to dive in and offer your observations. But given the struggle through the last couple of agendas, it's important to clarify what each of you think makes sense in this venue and what may not, because it has another place.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I really appreciate it. I think this is a great forum in which to have this conversation. Shannon, do you want me to go first? Since I'm listed on the agenda first, and just kind of speak for EPA, and then you could go?
Yeah, we can go.
Perfect.
Sounds good.
Awesome. So I apologize to everyone because I think a lot of this is going to be repetitive. You know, it's something that we've covered in previous meetings, but I think it's good to kind of put it all out on the table in trying to be transparent and clear. So, you know, obviously we appreciate that you understand that EPA must decide each month on resources that we continue to expend on these CAG meetings. We, EPA as an agency, are obligated to assist interested communities in CAG activities. And here's the key part: as they relate to site issues. CAG meetings are the appropriate forum to discuss issues pertinent to the remedial program at the site. So in this case, we're talking about the Lowry Landfill Superfund site, as you all know. So as I mentioned in February, that was the meeting that I was the sole attendee from EPA. If we do not consider an agenda or a discussion to be pertinent to the site, we can't continue to expend resources on those meetings. So as we've reiterated at the January CAG meeting of this year, 2022, and then also in a letter dated December 2nd, the remedy in place is functioning as intended at Lowry. And furthermore, our most recent 5-year review concluded that the remedy is protective of human health and the environment. So therefore, EPA doesn't consider discussions challenging the remedy to be appropriate for these meetings and deem our participation. We are, as an agency, responsible by law for all final decisions at a Superfund site. The last thing that I want to say is a CAG by nature is not intended to be the only mechanism for community involvement at any site. We have sites without CAGs, we have sites with CAGs, and that's not the only way to reach EPA. We have an obligation to inform and involve the entire community through a variety of community involvement tools, activities, mechanisms. And as you know, and as you've exercised, there are a lot of other ways to communicate directly with us. You can pick up the phone and call me. You write letters, which you've done. You email me directly. I hear from Bonnie quite often. And those would be all appropriate ways to discuss things that would be outside the scope of what we would consider appropriate for these Lowry Landfill Superfund site CAG meetings. So that's kind of what I had to say. If there's any questions, I could take them directly, or maybe we just go to Shannon.
Yeah, I think it makes sense to go to Shannon, and then let's just open it up so that there's a full picture of it. So Shannon, let me give you the floor, and then we can really just open it up.
Yeah, I'm actually, Colleen's gonna share our update here, so.
Great.
Yeah, I'm gonna start and then Shannon will fill in with anything that I didn't quite cover. So from CDPHE's standpoint, and as most of you know, we have different regulatory programs that manage different projects in the area of the Lowry Landfill Superfund site. And so for us, the Lowry Landfill CAG meetings would not be the appropriate forum for discussions for those sites or projects that are either under a different regulatory mechanism, have a different project team that would not be in attendance at a Lowry Landfill CAG meeting, or that aren't under the control of the WSDs. So just as a couple of examples, Buckley Air Force Base. I know the community is involved with Buckley Air Force Base, but we don't talk about Buckley Air Force Base at Lowry Landfill CAG meetings, nor would it be appropriate for us to talk about Buckley Air Force Base at Lowry Landfill CAG meetings. And we do have very specific projects teams for each of our projects. And so the forums for public involvement for those projects under whatever regulatory mechanism they operate under are with that project team and with that regulatory mechanism. So if it's a RCRA site in the area, there are community involvement resources for RCRA sites and specific requirements. And we are always happy to set up a meeting with the community to talk about any of our sites. It's just that the forum for Lowry Landfill Superfund site is not appropriate for those other sites. So I don't ever want to send the message that your interest or involvement is not relevant or wanted. We just want to make sure we're using the right forum. So if you do have questions about any of the other facilities in the area that CDPHE has involvement in, let us know. We can set something up to discuss those with you.
Good.
Okay. So reactions, questions. Go ahead, Bonnie. Let me let you start. And I'm going to start with the CAG members first before I move to those who are outside the CAG. So Bonnie, let me ask you and the members of the CAG to go first before I go elsewhere.
Well, this meeting really is based upon EPA's guidance. And we have placed our concerns in the opening. And we would like to know, because EPA is the final regulatory authority, we would like to know, is the EPA willing to assist us, the citizens, in understanding our site better by helping us with the studies that they're doing on PFAS currently, PFAS technologies, PFAS health impacts, dioxane issues, because we have both issues now at our site, And we would like to know how EPA is planning to assist us with understanding our site. And also, we just had an O&M report that was released. And thank you very much for saying, Linda, that we can discuss this recently released report, because there is still work going on at the site. There's monitoring work, and I have seen some testing of the different various sites out there by the technical advisor for EPA, Parsons. And we'd like to be kept up on these activities. So that was very encouraging. And thank you for saying that our May meeting, we can talk about this with you. We think it's still important. And I think that's my outline. Is there anybody else on the CAG that has more that you would like to put in as an emphasis on our concerns? I guess that's it, Michael.
No,
Hey.
I'd like to add just a reaction that I have. I appreciate what Meg said. Oh, you can call me. Well, that's just fine. I can call you, I can email you, or Bonnie, or any of us can. But this particular setup that we have with CAG meetings is official and it's recorded. My calling you is not. And I believe that this is important, that we all have a face here and that we can all benefit from each other's questions. So it isn't just for me to hear Linda Kiefer say everything's great, everything's fine, or for CDPHE to say everything's great and everything's fine, and you can call me. I think that the CAG meeting that we have is a forum for us to hear our concerns, share our concerns, and make it official. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Paul.
thank you for that comment. I appreciate that. And you're also welcome to not call me if you want. I do agree that it's very valuable to have a recording of these conversations, because it's the CAG's responsibility and it's EPA's responsibility as well to convey accurate information and true information. And so, for example, I was wanting to record those agenda setting meetings because I was grossly misquoted earlier in this meeting, and this video will be released to the public, whereas the actual conversation that I had and the words that I said in the agenda planning meeting aren't captured. So maybe there is more we could do in terms of transparency. I understand the concern though with, like, if you give me a call, you know, it's not going to be recorded. But we do, I mean, those letters that the CAG sends are part of the public record. So that is one way to be transparent with your comments and thoughts and things like that. And it's, you know, an avenue for community involvement that you have utilized quite a bit. So
I have a
That's all.
question and clarification.
Yeah, Richard, go ahead, and then I've got one in the chat from Sonia.
Just for clarification on EPA's costs to provide the CAG,
Mhm.
the whole CAG operation.
Yes.
It's my understanding that all of the costs were to be paid by the responsible parties. Is that true, false? Where's that line go?
Mhm.
I'm going to kick that one to Linda. Who would
Yeah.
pay for our staff time, Linda? Do you know?
Yes, it's paid by the Lowry Trust.
Yes.
So what you're
Yeah,
saying,
but we spend over $200,000 a year in community involvement, if not more. So it is a considerable resource, and our staff at EPA, I mean, we have other sites that we take the time from so that we can spend the time on the Lowry site. So our resources are limited. It's not just a dollar amount.
okay, thank you.
So the question I've got from Sonia is, what should the CAG how should the CAG handle issues that have come up since the ROD was written? And so if narrowly this is for the remedy, but they have concerns that they believe post date the record of decision, is that a relevant agenda topic here? PFAS probably being an example of that, I would imagine, though that's my editorializing, not Sonia's.
So just to respond, I guess, specifically in terms of the PFAS subject, we've talked about this in meetings and we've also talked about it in letters. I can actually pull up the letter response that we've sent to the CAG leadership twice and read from it, if you'd like to, about the PFAS, if that would be an appropriate use of time here.
I'm not sure why you're saying that, Linda. We know what your answers from the EPA usually are. Usually it's misinformation that we're giving you. And usually it's you don't understand and here's what we're finding. And it's usually just an argument back and forth between us. Can you tell me the use that you're planning on providing EPA responses to the community?
So Meg, I do think it would be valuable for you to read the letter because Bonnie, what you had said in your opening about there not being an MCL for PFAS, is not why under CERCLA EPA cannot regulate that compound right now.
Oh.
It's because it's not a hazardous substance. For it to be a hazardous substance, it has to go out for public comment in the Federal Register. And then that was outlined in that letter. So that's why, Meg, if you have it, it would be great if you could read it.
Okay, so we have
Sure, I can pull that
we have not quoted what you said in the letter. I was remembering what was said at the last CAG meeting. And so if the community doesn't clearly state what you say, then we don't understand. Is that the issue here?
No, I just think that you don't understand that it has to be a hazardous substance first before EPA it has to become a law that we regulate it. And then once that happens, then EPA has the authority under the remedial program and a Superfund site to say, hey, we want you to test for this. We want you to do that. Right now, the authority lies within different state agencies, Metro Wastewater, and the programs that have offered the free testing for private wells for PFAS under the state. So that's where the current authority lies. So it is an opportunity for the public to provide comments when that does come out in the Federal Register for comment. I just don't know exactly when it's going to come out, but it should come out sometime this year. So we would like for you to comment when that happens, and we'll send you out some information when it is available.
Okay, we appreciate that, and we will comment. And thank goodness the state has got their program going. We are paying attention to that as well. And I don't think I misunderstood what was said about until there's an MCL or an MDL. I don't think I misunderstood that, Linda. I receive a lot of letters from EPA, and most of them are telling me that what we're assuming is not right, that we're giving out misinformation and we don't understand the program. However, I do understand that there is proof that there's PFAS at the site. I do understand that when we brought it up and said that what happens at the Daquapuff RCRA site does impact the Superfund site, we were told we were not to talk about it and that EPA would literally leave the meetings if we discussed this issue. However, what we find now is that because the Daquapuff site has the exact same dumpers and chemicals at the Lowry Landfill Superfund site, we believe that we should go forward and at least finding out if it's there. That's all we're asking for. And we're being told we cannot even find out if there is PFAS within the Superfund site in order to start planning for future needs, because EPA doesn't have, it is not designated a hazardous waste. However, nationally, it is moving as a hazardous waste and a health issue, and they're moving towards making rules regulating that. We respect that. We will comment on that. However, we would like to be ready when we do find out if it is in the Superfund site. That's our goal. And so if EPA cannot say, if EPA Region 8, Linda Kiefer, is saying we don't see it as a hazardous waste right now, it doesn't mean we can't find out if it's there and start making plans as we move forward for what we need to do. That's what we're asking for.
Meg, can you read the letter, please?
Sure. So again, I apologize for folks if this is repetitive, but okay. So dated January 25th, 2022, dear Miss Rader, thank you for your November 14th, 2021 letter regarding your concerns about per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, also known as PFAS. The EPA takes risks from PFAS contamination seriously and understands potential widespread impacts of these chemicals. Accordingly, the EPA is beginning the process of designating PFAS as a CERCLA hazardous substance, beginning with public comment in the spring of 2022. Notice for comment will be published at www.regulations.gov. Additional information about PFAS can be found at epa.gov/PFAS/PFAS explained. Until PFAS is designated as a CERCLA hazardous substance, the EPA's CERCLA authorities are limited. However, the state of Colorado is also working to regulate PFAS. Pertinent to the CAG's concerns, a new state PFAS grant program offers an opportunity for private well owners to have their wells tested for PFAS free of charge. Again, I apologize. I know we've already been over this. With respect to the connection between PFAS and the Lowry landfill site, the EPA remains confident in the integrity of the existing remedy. Additional information specific to the Lowry landfill and PFAS is captured in the most recent 5-year review. It's signed by the chief of our remedial of the Superfund Emergency Management Division Remedial Branch Chief, Aaron Erdalius.
Well, it's kind of silent, so I'll ask a question.
Then I'm going to Sonia's, but go ahead, Richard.
It would be Linda. Is molybdenum, I can't say it right, Molly, is it under CERCLA as a hazardous substance?
I don't know. I'd have to look it up. But as we talked about before, seems like it's naturally occurring there, so it wouldn't be regulated by EPA.
But my point is, if in fact it is designated a hazardous substance, then I can see, oh yeah, you can go out there and test for it. If it's not, you tested for it anyway. So therefore, if that's true, you can test for PFAS also if you choose to, I think, my opinion.
So they were testing for Molly because it's in their wastewater permit. It is something that is regulated. So there was an exceedance and then they tracked it back, and that's how they found out that the molybdenum was high in that one area. It is not a chemical of concern at the site. When we did the initial remedial investigation, they screened the chemicals to see which ones were high enough to be a level of concern. Molybdenum did not reach that level. So it's an isolated case, and it is being regulated through the wastewater permit process.
But it's not considered a hazardous waste.
I don't know. I'd have to look it up, Richard.
I'd really like to know.
It's not a CERCLA hazardous substance. That doesn't mean that it's not hazardous, but it's not deemed a CERCLA hazardous substance. If I understand you correctly, if you're speaking about molybdenum.
Yeah, how do you know that?
I just looked it up.
Just, okay, that's fine. Then you've answered my question and you could just test away out there. Thank you.
So I want to go back to Sonia's and not paraphrase this time. So I'm going to read it verbatim at her request. Please explain how and in what forum or capacity the CAG should raise issues that are directly related to the issues at the site that have surfaced since the ROD was written, but which are not addressed in the remedy.
Well, I think that you've been doing that. I mean, that's my understanding is that the letters, the emails, and any other kind of communication, I guess phone calls, although they're not recorded, have been on these types of subjects as well. And we've responded to them. Is that, are you looking for a different kind of answer? I guess I'm confused about it. Oh, wait, she said that she doesn't have microphone, I think.
Right.
She says, okay, so she can't respond unless it's
I'm
in
looking to see if
chat.
anything else got typed. So Sonia,
Okay.
type away.
I do have phone capacity. Can you hear me?
Yeah, of course.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right. So basically, so my question is, when we bring these issues up during the course of a meeting or request to discuss them at a meeting, they're not accepted. So what you're saying then in response is that if related to any such issues that have surfaced since the ROD was written that aren't in the remedy, that we should address them in writing. Is that right?
So I think we're getting a little bit caught up here. So the question I think originally was, what would be a topic where EPA would not participate? What would lead EPA to choose not to participate in the CAG meeting? As far as I'm concerned, it's a free country. You are a group. You can meet and call yourself whatever you want with or without EPA's participation. The question really is about EPA's participation. So if there's a topic that we don't deem to be acceptable for our participation in the CAG, you're still welcome to meet in any kind of a forum to talk about it amongst yourself. But what we're saying is about EPA's attendance. And I can't speak about any of the other agencies. I can't speak for any of the other agencies, the WSDs, but I can speak for EPA. Like, this is specifically just for EPA. Is that clear?
Yes, except here's where it intersects. So there are topics that you don't want us to discuss at CAG meetings. Oftentimes there are issues we feel are significant concerns that you all do not wish to address, or some feature of the regulatory process doesn't allow you to address in the way we want to. And so then we try and communicate with you by letter, and you respond, but you often don't acknowledge that the concern is valid or in what way it could be addressed. And so that's where we run into problems of, we're feeling like our concerns are being ignored, and you feel like you're attending to the regulatory process, but it seems like some significant issues are getting overlooked. And so if we're communicating on those only by letter, it seems like we often get responses that don't address the issue, don't acknowledge the issues and ways to address them.
So can I ask you a question then? Because I hear you, I do. And I agree. I think these meetings could be more effective. And I think we're always at EPA trying to understand and fine tune the way that we're doing community involvement, right? Because we need to, it's like I said, it's our obligation to reach the entire community, not just this group of 12 people, but to reach this entire community fairly in a transparent manner with truthful information. And so can I ask, what are your ideas? what would be a good way? Because it seems like like as Mike had said, like we've been spinning our wheels a little bit with the past couple of months with these agendas. And I'm kind of hearing from what you're saying, and if this isn't right, tell me, but kind of hearing that maybe the letters don't really feel like they're acknowledging your concerns in a real way. So like, what are some other ideas that you have on a way that we could better engage you and the greater community of the Lowry Landfill Superfund site and acknowledge
Thank
those
you.
concerns?
Thank you. So, for example, with regard to the injection well issue, I had spoken earlier with Steve, I forget his last name, from the EPA, and he suggested that issues that have surfaced since the time of the assessment that led to the remedy could be addressed by requesting that the ROD be reopened to include that issue. I don't know what that process is called, I don't recall, but I'm wondering if that might be a more fruitful way of addressing these things. So for example, using the same process to address PFAS so that we're not waiting, a year or two down the line for the EPA to decide what exact level is deemed hazardous. Do you know the process I'm referring to?
Of reopening the ROD? Of reopening the remedy decision?
Steve Wharton was the one, that's his name. All right, so he was saying that if there are specific issues, for example, when the ROD was created, there was no such thing as horizontal, unconventional fracking for oil and gas, but it certainly exists now. And some of us, me in particular, expressed concerns regarding possible disturbance at the site, and to look at that to establish some regulatory limitations on engaging in that commercial activity within the vicinity of the Lowry landfill site. And he said you could apply to put that in as a new issue, a new technology, a new, I forget all the list of items he had, but new discoveries that pertain to public health and safety that would impact the site, to ask the EPA to take a look at this new issue, whether it be PFAS or injection wells from fracking, et cetera, in order to look at that issue. So again, I'd have to check, I guess, with Steve Wharton, but I'm sure you must be familiar with some process that he was describing to do that, and maybe that would be more fruitful.
I believe that we have, it sounds like the current ways in which we're engaging with the community really aren't effective, because I know that we've covered this topic via letter, and I know that we've covered this topic several times in the CAG. So I think maybe as a group, we need to brainstorm some new ways, because it seems like we just keep some new ways to talk about the issues at this site and address them and make sure we're including the entire Lowry landfill community, because it does seem like we kind of reach the same crossroads again and again. And we're spinning our wheels a little bit, in my opinion. I do see that others have questions. I don't know if it's okay to move on, or what do you think?
Yeah, Tom, let me let Tom in, and we can keep this rolling. So Tom, go ahead. You're up.
One of the things that began is a wall blocking discussion is when we get told that finalized reports can no longer be discussed, and yet we're able to discuss a lot of past history. We're able to discuss the ROD, which is I don't know if you call that a finalized report, but I think that that's kind of an artificial way of saying, hey, you can't talk about it anymore, when new issues may come up that that are related to that report that may need to be looked at, even if they weren't looked at in the report.
Yeah, Tom, I don't think that's what I heard, and maybe I didn't hear it the same way you did clearly, that the final reports can be talked about. And there have been efforts to put them on the agenda so that you all could talk about them. What I heard was in our meetings, you and Bonnie saying, well, if it's final, then we should, then we're not going to talk about it. That came from the two of you.
Oh,
Saying,
Oh,
if it's
no, it
final, there's
didn't.
nothing to talk
No,
about.
it did not. No, it did not. That was from
Okay.
EPA. It's final, no more discussion. That was
Yeah,
it.
and I heard you say, if it's final, then why should we bother?
Yes, because we won't, they said we won't accept any more comment. It's
Mhm.
final,
So-
that's it.
So you want to discuss reports that have been made final,
Yes.
okay?
Yeah,
Okay, like the one that's in play now. Okay,
So can we? EPA,
Yes.
can,
Oh, sounds like a toilet's flushing. I don't know who that is.
I think
Did
John,
anyone else hear that, or was that just me?
I think John's in the hospital and it came up under John, so. that's-
Okay. Well, I'm
So-
sorry to hear that, John. Thank you for joining us. I think you get the gold star this month if you're joining from the hospital. That's a real effort.
what?
I just said thank you. He's joining us from a non-conventional location. I thought that was really cool.
Oh,
and we-
Okay, so regarding the reports, so remember we did offer to talk about the 5-year review report, and I think there was some miscommunication with Bonnie and I via email. She thought that I was referring to the 2017 5-year review report, but actually we were talking about the 2022 5-year review report, which was just released a few months ago, and I did send out a link to that. So we had talked about wanting to explain that to the group if that was something you guys were interested in. And my understanding, Mike, was the same as yours, that it was, since it was finalized, that it wasn't of interest for the CAG to hear about it, which is totally fine. But our role at EPA and at this site team is to try to make these documents accessible and try to make whatever tools we need to do to help the community understand these. So the time for weighing in on those things were before they were final, and when you could comment on them, right? But that doesn't mean we don't listen. I mean, it doesn't mean the door is shut, right? It's like always a two-way street. We're listening. We're here for the next hour, So whatever you would like to discuss, whether it's finalized or not, that's up to you. And again, we're more than willing to explain these major decision documents like the 5-year review and the site status report. It's huge. It's full of information about the site that is super technical, and we would love to make that more accessible to you. And that's what we really see as our role here too, is like making sure that we reach the community, not just this group of people, right, with that information, because no one's going to sit down and read a 1,000-page report.
Yeah, it's kind of hard on us to do that now because you have pulled our funding for our technical advisor. And now we have to try to do it ourselves, and we're just not up to speed as good as a technical advisor or engineers or people like you.
Well, that's kind of my role too, though, Rich, is like to bridge it a little bit. I am a scientist by trade, but I try to be a not so nerdy scientist, if you will, and try to talk to people in a way that meets them where they are. So part of that is on me, and that's why the community involvement coordinator role exists, is like, we need to figure out where you guys are and where the community is and what we're delivering, and somehow make that bridge happen. And I just think
That bridge happens under the circle allowable tag to have a technical advisor. that is not an EPA person, love them or not. And that makes real sense. So
Yeah, I
that's why
understand.
we can't just jump in and go through a multi-page report and understand it all. And that's
And
why
yeah,
that's why the EPA funds technical advisors, and all of a sudden ours is gone. And we
right.
don't want you to pay them monthly. We only want to have to pay them when we ask them a specific question about a specific issue in a specific document. That's not, we don't expect the EPA to put them on salary, and they never have. But the way it's worked in the past has been great, just great.
Yeah,
So
and I
Margie,
understand, and I
sorry, Meg,
get
let me let Margie in here as well.
okay.
Oh, thank you. There's a lot of discussion about community involvement and how you need to notify the community beyond just this CAG. And I don't know what methods you are using to do that. I may have missed it, but I don't believe you said. But you did ask for suggestions, and I will just mention that in 2006, the EPA, and I don't remember if CDPHE was part of it or not, but the EPA came to my community along with representatives from the developer and the city of Aurora to talk about the Lowry landfill site. And we were told at the time, we're keeping an eye on everything. There are no problems there. Don't worry. We would never allow anything to hurt the public. Well, the plume had already started at that time, and that really wasn't acknowledged. And now the plume is even farther than it was then. And here it is now, what, 16 years later? And have you ever been back to our community? Have you gone to any of the other neighborhoods? Did you ever have a meeting with Gun Club Estates and Thunderbird Estates, who have a very real concern about this because of their water wells? So I'm not sure what you all are doing as far as community engagement is concerned, but I will just stop there. Thank you.
Well,
Okay,
thanks,
I have a
Margie.
couple
I
of,
didn't hear.
oh, sorry, Mike, go ahead.
Can I? Yeah, I didn't hear many, like a question there. I think it was more of a comment, but I just want to be clear. So all CAG members, by definition, and the EPA, honestly, we serve as a direct and reliable conduit of information to and from the community. So you, as a CAG member, do have the responsibility to share information with other members of the affected community. And I'm curious if that's happening.
Well, first of all, I think that's an incredible cop-out. But yes, my neighborhood has, from time to time when it's appropriate, we have notified the community about these meetings, but you can't just throw something out there like that and expect people to get all excited and involved in it when they don't have a background. And I personally am not the right person to present a lot of background to my neighbors. I don't have the technical expertise for that. And once again, I think that was a cop-out. Thank you.
Go ahead.
I'm gonna look for other members of the CAG to jump in.
Michael,
Yeah,
this is John.
Yeah, John, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so I think that this is not a question, it's a comment that I think might give you and those agencies that are on this phone an understanding of what the CAG is trying to say. This is a metaphor. So here's the CAG. We're saying we have concerns. Here they are. These are the signs. These are the things that are happening. These are the things we're concerned about. And the agencies are like, we got that under control. Don't worry about it. You're misinformed. You don't know what's going on. You don't understand. Everything's fine. Let's just kick the can down the road. And we bring up something else, and it's just kick the can down the road. And what this feels like to us is like somebody's got stomach cancer. It's got all these signs going on, and suddenly everybody realizes stage 4 cancer and we die. That's the way it feels to the CAG, that this thing's going to blow up someday, and you kick the can down the road until it does, and then it'll be too late, because they don't legitimately hear our concerns. They just kind of fluff them off and kick the can down the road. So that's why we don't feel heard. I don't know if anybody else wants to jump in, but that to me is where it's at. And so this meeting is just another circular conversation like many have been. And that's why we don't feel heard.
I'm
Thank you
really
very much.
curious what Bridget has to say. She's had her hand up from day one. And
Yeah, I'm
curious.
getting-
I'm real curious.
Yeah, I'm getting all the CAG members in, and then I'm gonna go to Bridget and Joan after. So, other CAG members?
Oh, it
Meeting?
looks like Sonia just put something in the chat, Mike.
Yeah, Sonia,
You
please.
said-
Hi, thank you. So I had brought up the alternative that Steve Wharton had presented and discussed with us. And I didn't hear anything further from you, Meg, so I wanted a specific answer if I could get one. What is that avenue called whereby you petition the EPA to recognize a new issue related to a new technology or issue that surfaced since the ROD was written? What is it called? And can you tell us a little bit more about how it works? Thank you.
I'm not at all familiar with that process, which probably tells you how rare it is. But Linda, I don't want to throw you under the bus, but do you know about this process? I'm not even sure what she's referring to.
What Steve was referring to.
Yeah.
No, there is no formal process, so that I know of. So written communication that you have a concern. What EPA does need is that there's an unacceptable exposure to human health and the environment. And we need evidence of that, like physical, like data, not like connecting dots that aren't necessarily connected. And that would be something that we would look at, but there are no guarantees that anything what would happen from that process.
Is there a formal name for that process?
No, there is no process. There's just, no, there's not. It's just communicate to EPA your concerns. If we feel that there is something more to it, we will look into it, but there's no formal process.
Okay,
Okay.
so no regulation that pertains specifically to new technologies or new scientific discoveries that impact potential for harm.
No.
So was
Is it-
Steve mistaken?
You know, I don't know if I was at the meeting when he hasn't been at our meetings for quite a while. So there is no name of a process for that.
Am I the only one that can't believe that something written in 1984 is as good as it gets, and that nothing can occur from 1984 until now, given all kinds of advancements with science and technology, that is just going to be sealed in stone? And it's kind of like the King and I, when he says, I have written what is written, it is done, it is done. And that's how I feel about what it is that EPA says and does with the things that are important to us. And then you say data has to be provided. Well, who the hell's going to do the testing if EPA is not going to do the testing? And you won't do the testing until EPA decides to do the testing. The whole thing is just ridiculous. And I'm very angry.
Bridget,
Yeah, this is Rudy Villarreal on the CAG. You know, I find it interesting. I have to agree with everything that's been said by John and everybody, because, you know, what's amazing to me is that there is no reversal. What you're basically what EP is saying is that, first of all, there's nothing in writing that says that you can do a reversal. I really find that hard to believe. I mean, there has been reversals of people that have been put in jail for doing incorrect things, and because of DNA testing and stuff, they find that they are ultimately freed from jail. So I have to agree what everybody's saying is that I love how EPA is very talented in wanting to now just remove themselves, throwing their hands up, says, well, I've never seen anything like this happen. This is a remote situation. And, you know, it's like what John is saying. We're just going around in circles, because as long as EPA conveniently circumvents a situation, like John said, at some point, this super landfill is going to blow up, and then it's going to be, you know, then you guys are going to have to become accountable for your inconsistencies.
I just need to add to this point that reopening the ROD is a process. And I'm amazed that we're hearing that we don't know of the process. If new information comes forth, if there is an imminent threat, or if there's something that's found out, say for instance, you brought in the EPA team that goes and investigates sites that are supposed to be safe, and they find that it's not safe, then they reopen the ROD. I don't know what's going on here. This is totally foreign to me.
So part of the Superfund process is that 5-year review. Every 5 years we are required, 5 years or less, 5 years is the max, right? We've covered this, to revisit the site and see if the remedy is functioning as it's intended, if it's working. I know that's not what you want to hear, Bonnie, but that's the truth. And you didn't want to discuss.
Excuse me, Bridget, but you know, Meg, what I want to hear is not the issue here.
This is Meg, not Bridget.
Scientific information is what we want, and what we've been hearing is what EPA wants us to hear, and what Waste Management wants us to hear. And what we're confused about is why we can't have an outside investigation over and above what's been happening with EMSI, EPA Region 8, and how this has been coming down. And so nobody wants that information out there. And every time new information comes up, we're told we can't have a grant to have a technical advisor because there's no more information. Well, hallelujah, there's a lot more information to be found from this site, folks. And one of them is PFAS. The other is that we need to find out whether it is dangerous or not, and we need to start discovering how we can control this. It is not controlled. And yet every 5 years, we're told it is controlled. And if we don't like it, we're sorry. We know that's not what you want to hear, but that's the way it is. So I'm not sure what's going on here right now, but I am sure that a ROD reopener can happen. And I'm distressed that we're hearing that there is no process for that. There is a process for that.
Okay, more from the CAG members? Then I'm going to open it up to the outside.
Bridget,
Well, wait, can we get a response from EPA maybe at the next meeting about what is the process for reopening the ROD? Maybe that should be on the agenda.
Yes.
There is,
well, it
There's
can't
not-
come from Linda. If she says there's not.
right, yes, because the plan that we have in place, right, for the ROD, that was all solidified in the consent decree in a court. So there were a lot of people that worked on the ROD, and Bonnie was one back then. A lot of community input went into it, a lot of experts. So all that work that they did is encompassed in that. And there's no indication that what that plan the remedy is not functioning as it was intended to. So
Excuse me, Linda, back in those days, I and all the farmers that live out here disagreed with this decision and said you will never be able to contain 100 million gallons of chemical waste, never. And we disagreed. And all of the industries, the Coors, the Hewlett Packards, all of those companies who sat at the table with us said, you don't understand science. We know it can be contained. And because EPA says this is the cheapest remedy, this is the way we want to go because we don't want to spend money cleaning it up. So let's be honest about this. Yes, I was involved and I did disagree then. I fought it then. So did the farmers and ranchers who were living out here at the time. You cannot contain 100 million gallons of chemical waste in a landfill. So yes, you're right. I did communicate with that. I did disagree with it. I agree.
and it is the remedy we use nationally for all of our
Wow.
landfills.
Yep.
And, yep,
And it's
So-
not working.
it works for everybody else.
Where?
Well, how do you
Other
explain the
landfills.
plume? Well, how do you explain the plume if it's working?
Yeah, there's been several fact sheets done on that, why the plume is there. Back when they were re-injecting water from the water treatment plant, the level of detection for 1,4-dioxane was very high, so they didn't see it. And once they stopped re-injecting water with 1,4-dioxane, so it's residual. So it's been decreasing every year in concentration, and we know why it's there. So it's not because anything's leaking.
Why did you allow them to do that?
Allow them to do what?
Pollute the now plume? Why did you allow them to do that? Why
Like I
didn't
said, they
contain
didn't
it?
know that there was 1,4-dioxane in the water that they were injection because their treatment method didn't treat for it. And when the detection levels became low enough that they could see it, then they stopped doing it and put measures in to reduce the size of the plume. So hindsight's 2020.
So yeah, actually, the EPA did not have any
Everything on
specialists
info.
that could look to see if there was
Yeah, that's
dioxin in any amount in that water.
Not at the time.
Okay.
But the plume hasn't been reduced.
Yes, it
I
has
think-
been.
I
The,
disagree, Linda. The
that's-
injection has been reduced. The injection of water has been reduced. They have injected 100 million gallons of water and spread this stuff around. They have quit injecting, so now you think the plume is reduced, but in reality, you're only dealing with the chemicals themselves now, and it's going to take more years to figure out what those chemicals are actually going to do to our environment. You don't know yet. There's no final decision on that. But thank God they quit injecting our water because our water tables have dumped 24 feet. Just recently, our water tables that we use for our well water have dumped 24 feet. And yet they had the audacity to use water to disintegrate these chemicals to make it look like it was getting better. And all they did was spread it around.
More thoughts from CAG members, more agency reaction to those concerns about agenda items? Okay. I don't think we're going to keep you to the 6:30 mark. Let me just give Bonnie and then Joan a chance to step in, offer a couple of comments.
I want to hear from Bridget, please.
Yeah, that's where I'm going.
All right,
Okay, Bridget, you're up first. Thanks for your patience.
thank you.
I think I covered my concerns in the chat. I just wanted to point out that the CAG has a very special congressionally mandated status that is codified in law, regulation, and in EPA documents. A special relationship EPA has with CAGs and certain responsibilities. They do not have any of that with community organizations. And so my experience with CAGs and from what I've heard from other CAGs is that EPA is very interested in getting rid of CAGs. And I think that this CAG should maybe explore the relationship with waste management and EPA in decision to try the CAG. Waste management has made a lot of decisions. We just heard the EPA trusted waste management, I guess, on the plume issue, which didn't work out so well. But I do think that relationship should be examined. Anyway, I defer to Joan.
Okay, Joan. Again, thanks for your patience while the CAG members went first.
Bonnie, thank you. Everyone, thank you. And Bridget, doggone it, thank you. You're just right on the ball. Real quick, you know, from the beginning as an outsider, I tried to follow the paper trail with Lowry Landfill. And I followed Superfund sites through looking at the EPA's website. And it's absolutely confusing. I tried to find CDPHE's institutional controls. I think institutional controls are kind of an important subject to look at. And so I was confused at this point. Everyone keeps referring to the record of decision. And now EPA is talking about O&M. And then I need to know quickly, my question would be, one of them is, has Lowry Landfill been delisted and we are now in the operations and maintenance phase of that delisting? Is that correct? While you're using the term O&M?
No, the O&M is a specific part of the Superfund process. Delisting is a separate process.
No, I get that. Delisting can include, after the delisting, O&M. We just saw that at the Vasquez Boulevard site, that so are you saying that there are still some continuing operable units in Lowry that are not delisted, but there are some delisted? So I'm just confused because you can't follow the EPA's website very well, which is of interest to look at this. So the O&M, as I said, are you saying, are there any OUs in Lowry that are delisted?
No, there are no operable units that have been delisted from Lowry.
So this is not a delisted Superfund site, but you are now concluding that they are in operations and maintenance.
Yes, the determination that it was going to operations and maintenance was in 2006.
2006.
There was an official designation of operations and maintenance in 2006. All remedial action activities were completed.
So we are now in containment. Is that correct? We are in containment of the waste at Lowry Landfill. Is that right?
Yes, it's the containment remedy.
Containment remedy. It's coming through. And so Lowry is not delisted. It isn't proposed it'll ever be delisted. Do you believe that? So I'll have to read what you have just said is considered the operations and maintenance, which is very important to this CAG. I mean, that is very important to the CAG. And that did you include this operations and maintenance in your 5th 5-year review?
I'm not sure what that question means.
You just completed a 5th 5-year review that you didn't mention anything about PFAS, where I saw documents that the locals had already been looking at PFAS, and it was never mentioned in the 5th 5-year review.
Actually, PFAS is mentioned in the 5th 5-year review.
I apologize, then I missed it. But operations and maintenance.
I missed it too. Where was it mentioned, please, Linda?
Bonnie, thank you. I thought I was losing it, but I could be.
You said everything was fine because there was no new evidence that came through on your fact sheet. So if it was listed and if it was noted, can you please guide me to where?
So that would be definitely question 1. But the other question for me, Bonnie, is that this facility has not been delisted. It appears, I don't think it's ever going to be delisted unless there is a target date that they can see because it's like Rocky Flats, following Rocky Flats. And there's institutional controls going on. I can't find an accurate, up-to-date list of all the institutional controls. Perhaps I'll find that in the 2022 or maybe in operations and maintenance of institutional controls that are going on at Lowry right now. Has there been any failures? The community, since it hasn't been delisted, could absolutely be a party to this operations and maintenance. Lastly, I was trying to find a website for maybe, since I can't get it through EPA site, because I found another site called LowryLandfill.com, and the key contacts were Waste Management, US EPA, Tri-County Health, and this is a a public-private partnership. And as I said, contacts are EPA, CDPHE, Waste Management, Denver. These, and I didn't see anything where the citizens have been given an opportunity to talk about being a party, not to clean up, but containment of this site. And that's what we're seeing in many Superfund sites, is they're not cleaning them up, they're trying to contain them. And if there's been any off-site movement of contamination from Lowry, this is a failed containment. So I'll be looking forward to your O&M, but now that it's hit me, no institutional controls have been provided accurately by EPA or CDPHE that are current. I can't see the list. Maintenance, one last thing, operations and maintenance, is that in your 5-year review?
Yes, we discuss operations and maintenance. We discuss PFAS. We discuss institutional controls. There's a chart of the institutional controls with a map. All that is in the
You have a
5-year review.
presentation before you finalized your 5th 5-year review. Did you already take this to the CAG and give them an opportunity on operations and maintenance if there's any lack of containment, blah, blah, blah? Do you do that? I found out, and maybe I'm wrong, but it looks as if EPA does not go to the CAGs when they do 5-year reviews. They do their 5-year review and that's it. So are you saying before the 5th 5-year review, you had a meeting and you got all the input that you needed to include in your 5th 5-year review?
Yes, the CAG members were given the opportunity to, one, provide written comments and or participate in a verbal interview. All of their comments and the notes from those meetings are included in the 5-year review. So you just have to look through it. All the information that you want is in the 5-year review.
I apologize for this. I didn't mean to interrupt again, but are you saying that you sent out a notice to the CAG that they can give you written review? Was that after it had been, or was this a draft that you had given the community to look at, and then you interviewed people individually and not the CAG for their input into that 5-year review?
So one, we put a notice in the newspaper while we're drafting the 5-year review. That happened in the Aurora Sentinel. We also sent emails to the members of the CAG and various members of the community and gave them the opportunity 6 months before the 5-year review was finalized to provide their comments on that. Their comments were taken into consideration during the writing of the 5-year review. The 5-year review was written in draft by SKIO, which is a national contractor that writes our 5-year reviews from them. All the comments were put in the 5-year review from the community. That is, so that's the process. That is an actual official process that EPA uses for all of our 5-year reviews.
And I would like
Fiona,
to
if I can-
add that there was no discussion of PFAS in the 5-year review draft. And I would like to mention that the CAG did not agree with the EPA's 5-year review draft documents. And it's on record with all the documents that we wrote, and we're not allowed, like for instance, Tom Kraus has made very specific comment on the capture zone and why we should not consider this to be a successful 5-year review, and saying everything because there's no capture. So how can we say that this is successful when there's no capture? And so those were our comments, and I do not remember any PFAS discussion, very little discussion about the 1,4-dioxane, except to tell us that they knew it was okay now. And our comments were not taken as seriously as we would like it to have been. And so I would like to say, Linda, you're not lying about this. However, what you're saying is EPA followed the rules that they're supposed to follow in the 5-year review. And that's all that matters. And we were told we were wrong in our assumptions as well. So let's make this an even playing field here.
So
Bonnie,
if I can,
one
there's
last-
Joan, hang on, Joan, hang on.
Sorry.
Bonnie, someone has dropped a reference to PFAS on pages 35 and 36 in the last 5-year review. I want to go to Shannon because she's got her hand up. So Shannon, go ahead and jump in.
I just wanted to make a factual clarification on something a community member said earlier, and I'm not trying to insinuate anything from this, but CAGs, I think it was said CAGs are secured by law. I just want to clarify, CAGs are not, required by law to be implemented, but we do have a lot of, guidelines and policies around how CAGs function the best and how they can assist with sites. But I just want to clarify that and put it out to the public.
Okay.
Thanks,
Joan,
Shannon.
the other thing I would suggest, this conversation about the 5-year review took place in a CAG meeting. And so what you heard Bonnie say is part of a recording from a previous meeting about the 5-year review. So those recordings exist of these meetings, and you can go back and look at those for the discussion of the 5-year review here.
I apologize. Thank you, Mike. One thing for Joan again, one last thing was that issue of that website that's called Lowry Landfill website, where all the contact names for the PRPs are at the beginning. And at the end, they also show you the names of all of the contacts for EPA and CDPHE. Why would the PRP?
I think if that's Joan, if that's a .com, that's a private site. So does anyone know who set that up? LowryLandfill.com.
Probably Waste Management and Tri-County Health, and Lynn is here. She can tell whether Tri-County Health was the participant in that, but Tri-County Health had a site that.
Those would be .org.
Yeah.
Those would be .org.
Okay, well.
That doesn't sound like an official site.
I don't know who in the heck else would set up a site other than Waste Management. And, I don't know, but I do know that Tri-County's been working with the WS.
So.
Well,
I
there's
don't know if-
definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank
So-
you very much.
Yeah. Okay, more? Shall we let you go about your evening while the sun is out?
No,
Okay. I did drop in the chat. I don't know if you all saw it, but the recollection, my recollection that the March 31, 2022 report, the operation and maintenance status report is the subject for May, or is a primary subject for May. So I dropped that in the chat at 5:49. So Bridget, another thought?
thank you so much.
Yep.
It's really a pleasure to be here and to hear all this discourse and to see all these incredible people who volunteer their time to try to protect our environment. And I did have one last question for EPA, and that was, do you have contact? Do you have correspondence with Waste Management regarding the Lowry landfill?
That,
What-
I mean,
Like, what do
EPA
you mean?
oversees the work that's done by Waste Management and City of Denver and their contractors.
But
And I mean,
has Waste Management ever mentioned this CAG?
have they said the word CAG?
Well, have they ever mentioned this group or a citizens group or input from a citizens group, or have they expressed a concern about the impact of a citizens group? Do you get the drift?
So Bridget, when these are technical meetings, which tonight was not, They're here every time.
Who's here every time?
Waste management.
So
Well, where are they, Michael? Michael, I don't see their
tonight-
names on. I don't see their names.
Tonight was a meeting about your process and agendas, so they're not here
So
tonight.
Waste management is not there. So waste management attends all the CAG meetings?
Yeah, the WSDs attend the meeting.
Where
So
are
that's
they?
nice. So has the waste management ever expressed any concerns to EPA about this group?
No,
So is the attorney for waste management, chemical waste management involved in the discussions on what's going on with the CAGs, Linda?
I do not even know who the attorney for chemical waste management is.
Really?
Nope.
The meetings are available on YouTube online. Anyone can look them up.
Oh, good.
And so Bridget, you got to understand that they have technical meetings that we are not invited to. They talk about us. They talk about what they're going to do. They are not recorded. They don't have minutes. They won't let us come, and they will not let us participate in any shape or form in those technical meetings. So of course they talk about us, but Linda can say no because there's no minutes, there's no recording, there's no nothing. Of course they talk about us. We're part of the whole process. So they're talking about us. The problem is that they cheat. They don't keep notes. They don't let anything come out in the public. They just
So
hide behind the door.
So John, that's completely untrue.
Richard, if I can, y'all have moved well past your agenda. So if there are other.
Really, Mike,
Yeah.
I think this is a very germane question. The role of waste management in the EPA's interest in perhaps getting rid of this CAG, which has been incredibly effective for years.
So Bridget, I'm going to take that as a suggestion to Bonnie and Tom that they can decide what to do on future agendas when there is time to prepare for an agenda item that would cover it if they choose to. So we are now off the agenda. So the conversation was supposed to be about which topics are relevant for the CAG and which are not. And I have a hunch that you have exhausted that conversation.
I have a hunch. I haven't learned anything about that yet, Tom. Mike, Tom, have you found out yet what we are supposed to talk about, what we're not supposed to talk about? Do you have a clear picture yet?
Well, one of the things they said is that we can finalize reports, so that helps. They've told us a lot of things if it's not related to site issues or they don't feel it's related to site issues, we cannot talk about them. If we feel it's related to site issues, can we talk about them? And maybe, please answer that, number one, but also tell us what issues you think that we can talk about specifically.
So
Tom,
as
if I can, because maybe a little translation can help and maybe not. So I wrote, because I've been typing. One of the things that I heard Meg say in much earlier in this meeting is a reference to CERCLA authorities. So that's where the agendas belong. And that's where these meetings can happen, where there are CERCLA authorities, where it's related to Superfund. And to the degree that it is DADS or DAQUAPUF or land development in Aurora or injection or horizontal drilling wells for fracking off the site, those are not CERCLA questions. And so this is a venue for CERCLA questions, and no one is saying that those aren't important topics. They just don't belong here. So CERCLA authority is the sideboard. So does that help?
Yes.
Yeah, it helps, but let's clarify here. Who makes that determination? And it's my opinion, EPA believes they make that determination. So I have a real concern because our group believes that if there are PFAS in DAQUAPUF, there must be PFAS in the Superfund site, because all the wastes that were deposited in the Superfund site are one and the same wastes from one and the same companies that dumped in Aquapuff. And so we believe that does have an issue under CERCLA because we believe Lowry Landfill Superfund site has PFAS. And we would like it investigated. And yet we're being told that if we bring it up at a meeting, the agency will not attend, correct?
Is that a question for me and Linda?
Yes.
Okay, so let me be clear. If it refers to something that EPA deems is pertaining to the site, then EPA will participate. You are free to discuss whatever you would like to. We don't have control of that. We have to be mindful about where we're spending our resources in this current environment. And all I can say is like that I feel like I'm being repetitive here. I really apologize, but you are welcome to talk about whatever you would like to talk about. But our decision, EPA's decision, is based on whether we believe it pertains to the site or it doesn't. The CERCLA Superfund site, the CERCLA Authority, the Superfund site, as you mentioned, Mike. That's the line for us.
So if
there are other,
if we
there are other
want to talk
tools.
about, if we want to talk about finding out if there's PFAS in the Superfund site, EPA will not help us in that discovery. Is that correct?
That's not correct. That's
Okay.
not what I said.
Okay, that's not talking about it. That's the CAG asking that we test the Superfund site for PFAS to find out if it's there. And we're
Bonnie,
being
until
told
it's a hazardous
that we can't.
substance, I can't require the WSDs to sample for it.
Why not?
It's not a hazardous substance. Once that happens, different authorities change. I don't make the authority. It has to go through the regulatory process in Washington, DC. They make the rules. I just I apply them. So until it's a hazardous substance, until they have the science behind it, there's over 6,000 PFAS chemicals. Which ones are going to be regulated? Which ones aren't? I don't have the enforcement capability in the remedial program to require the WSDs to sample for it. And so until that changes, which is planned to happen in the next couple of years. So I can't do something that I am not authorized to do by Congress.
So you're saying that the EPA is not in control of the WSDs under the
There you
consent
go.
agreement, and therefore you can't ask them to test the site. But why cannot the EPA have Parsons drill and test to see? Or can the WSD say, no, you can't come here? It's our site.
I don't have the enforcement authority because it's not a hazardous substance to require the work settling defendants to sample for PFAS.
Well,
How
it
about
seems
yourself?
to me the national attention right now is saying it is hazardous. They're saying the cancer statistics on firemen, they're saying that the damage it can do would be enough for the Environmental Protection Agency to want to know if PFAS could be in that plume that is past the point of compliance. That's very important.
Okay. Is that the last word?
Now I got a question.
Good.
How about outside the Superfund site area that's not in Superfund site? Can we
Different meeting.
test it there?
Different meeting. Different question.
Linda should be able to tell me, is that owned by the WSDs, or can EPA say, no, you can't test? You can't test.
I'm actually going to defer to Colleen because she knows more about site assessment than I do.
Okay, we can talk to her later.
She's right there.
Colleen,
So I think that we were, I just wanted to jump in real quick. I think just back to revisit the original agenda, right? Like this is that we were supposed to be talking about what is appropriate for a CAG meeting and what isn't.
That's what we're
So-
talking about, Meg, and I don't know when you took over this CAG.
Oh,
Bonnie, let her
I'm
finish.
sorry.
Let her try to answer your
I'd like
question.
to let her finish, but I'm wondering why Linda's doing so little of the answering. She is a decision maker. She just said so.
And she told you the answer. You
There
didn't
we
like
go.
it. That's,
It's
but here
done.
we are.
It's done. It's
Yeah.
done. She told
Yeah,
us the
there's no
answer.
meeting of the minds.
Nope.
You asked the
Nope.
question, she gave you the answer. You don't like the answer. That would be the end of that.
No, it's not that I don't like the answer. I'm asking why Meg is giving the answer where Linda is the project manager and we want to hear from her what EPA will or will not agree to.
Yeah, so Meg's a member of this meeting and this conversation. She gets to finish.
Okay, finish, Meg.
I was just saying that if we just had a direct question about outside the Lowry landfill Superfund site, and I thought that the bounds of what we said was appropriate to talk about in this CAG meeting was the Lowry landfill Superfund site. We just had a pointed question about outside the site. So I'm just pointing to the fact that maybe this is an inappropriate topic for a CAG meeting, an example of an inappropriate topic for a CAG meeting.
However, let me just add to that CDPHE, if this plume is offsite and outside the Superfund boundaries and outside the realm of EPA, CDPHE should feel free to go in and test that plume for PFAS. And I don't think CDPHE thinks that plume is within their realm because EPA has final word. So that's our concern.
Yeah.
So Bonnie, let me address that real quick. As you know, CDPHE is testing domestic wells or offering to test domestic wells, and I'm not sure when that's scheduled to happen, through our PFAS grant program. And my understanding is as of beginning of April, we had at least 21 different residents sign up for that testing. And I think there was another area that was looking at maybe a community-wide grant, so there might be more than that. So my understanding from David Danny, and he talked about this in the meeting last time, was that if there are impacts to domestic wells detected from that sampling program, then through the grant program, there are funds available to try to determine sources. So there is a process that the state can take if there are exposures to drinking water, to the community through drinking water, to then go find out the sources and also to help provide alternate water sources. So that is something that is kind of captured under CDPHE's PFAS grant program. It is David Danny's group. It is not the Lowry landfill team or anybody in the division I work for. So if that leads there, then it would be David Danny's group that would run that program, but they do have those resources and the ability to do additional testing if it's needed.
And we appreciate that, Colleen. We appreciate that this program is there and available. And we want to thank the health department for taking this step. I guess our question is the plume from Lowry landfill is offsite and the CDPHE appears to believe that the EPA is the regulatory authority that's the lead, and we cannot ask CDPHE to test the plume because it's part of EPA's prerogative whether or not to test that plume. And so
Are you
we're
talking about the 1,4-dioxane plume, Bonnie?
yes, we'd like to know if there's PFAS in the offsite plume.
So our authority is very limited because we're not lead agency, as you said, for the Circle site. And we would need some other state level authority to require something. We don't have that. And we also don't have a pot of money to go doing, an investigation. So yeah, other than the PFAS grant program, which may eventually get there, we don't have an independent authority to do something like that at this stage without evidence that there's PFAS in drinking water in the area.
Okay.
So that the first step is to determine whether there's PFAS in the drinking water. If there is, then it opens up authorities on the state level to do additional testing. And so there's a process that has to be followed.
Okay. Thank you, Colleen. I understand what you're saying. And we're glad the PFAS program through the state is in existence. And we will do our best as a community to work towards figuring out where there may be other issues we need to talk with you about.
So I have a comment for Meg. So I heard Meg say, how in the world can the EPA, how can we figure out how to have better communication and in our meetings? And I'd just like to say, Meg, tonight was a hot one, and we all looked eyeball to eyeball, and the EPA did answer a lot of questions, maybe that was outside, but it worked great.
So you would consider this an effective meeting?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
that's good feedback. Thank you.
I've got a question, if possible. Tom?
Yeah, Tom, go ahead.
I'm trying to wrap my head around plume. Let me explain that a little better. The plume is created by the Superfund site, but it's not part of the Superfund site. The plume is being monitored by the Superfund site through the wells that the responsible parties have placed within within the plume. But again, it's not part of the Superfund site. And EPA then cannot ask the responsible parties to test for PFAS within the plume, and CDBHE can't ask the responsible parties to test within the plume because CDBHE doesn't have any, or EPA has all the authority over the responsible parties. So this kind of seems like a circular problem. Does anybody have an idea of how to solve that so that we can test in the plume and see if PFAS are present, even if we don't have a standard, at least we'd know whether they're present or not. And if they are, then we'd be concerned about whether they're present within the site.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think you're looking at David. David has pretty well have explained how it could happen, a test could be done. And I think that's where we got to go at CDPHE.
I don't.
Well, then,
I don't
Linda,
understand.
you're showing something.
Yeah, it is Linda showing something. So this is page 35 of the 5-year review. And so these are the paragraphs about PFAS. And I wanted to point out that the filtration system that the water treatment plant uses is granulated activated carbon. And that is what is used to remove PFAS from that. So talking about the 1,4-dioxane plume, and I mentioned earlier that the treatment method that the treatment plant was using didn't treat for 1,4-dioxane. It actually did treat for PFAS even back in 2006 and earlier, because granulated activated carbon is a very, very common filtration method. So I just wanted to point out that this is where that paragraph is. And I think a little bit later on. So one of the findings was consider sampling the influent and effluent of the water treatment plant. So Metro is the regulatory agency for that, and they are working on a plan for pretreatment facilities in relation to PFAS. And so that's in process. So, so your concern about does the 1,4-dioxane plume have PFAS? It's highly unlikely because the filtration system used at the plant would have filtered it out.
Well, Linda, I appreciate this. This is somewhat hopeful. We would like to know, number one, is the public going to get to see the results of this water treatment plant testing for PFAS? Will we get to see the results?
So, I mean, that's a question for Metro, but
Okay, we'll write them a letter and ask them if we can see the test results. Secondly, I'd like to point out that the carbon filtration is not the final end result for PFAS. Where does it go from the Metro system? Where does that go? Is it incinerated? Is it buried in a landfill? What happens with those filtrations? Because sometimes what goes through a water treatment plant becomes more toxic after it's treated. So where does this carbon filtration go?
are you talking about the Lowry landfill water treatment plant?
Yes, yes.
So in the operations in the SSR, their waste manifests are in there.
There's what?
So when waste is shipped, there's a waste manifest.
Okay.
And so that is in that operations and maintenance.
Okay, are you saying this is where I can find out what the final disposal is?
There are ways, specifically, I don't know exactly where to point you, but waste manifests which show where things go are in
Yes.
the SSR.
Yes, cradle to grave, you got it. So I guess what I'm saying is I'm concerned about whether these carbon filtration remnants are incinerated or are they disposed in a RCRA landfill? And so I think what you're saying is I need to ask this question of Metro, and I'll be happy to do that. Thank you.
No, okay.
Linda, this is Tom. I'm glad you, Linda, this is Tom. I'm glad you brought up activated carbon. Activated carbon does not take out all of PFAS. And also pilot studies are required to determine the most effective carbon product contact time and contact time in order to be able to take out PFAS. So those are studies that should PFAS be found to be a chemical of concern, which is likely, those are things that waste management and EPA need to be deciding upon and doing. Also, they need to decide is where did all that carbon go? And if it went somewhere else, which it obviously did, is it now protected? It still has all those PFAS in it. Are now those PFAS going into the environment because of where it was put, because it wasn't, the PFAS weren't taken out of it? Those are things that you guys are going to have to look at. And then we hope that what we do is talk about them now so that you can begin to look at them. And then when it does become a chemical of concern, then we can start to approach the subject.
Okay, more from the CAG before I go back to Joan. Okay, we got another 5 before you turn into pumpkins. So
I would like to know who some of the people on the meeting have been. Who is Tricia Pfeiffer? And there's a phone call ending in 160. Just curious. Erica Ponder. And I know at one meeting that we were asked by Mary to have people use their videos so we can see who we're talking to.
So I think the phone call is Sonia.
Sonia, is that you at 160? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you. Who's Tricia Pfeiffer and Erica Ponder, please?
Yes. Hey, can you hear me?
I can.
Yep.
Hey, I am the branch manager for the technical assistance branch in the hydro support that's on the project for
Okay.
EPA.
Nice to meet you,
Oh,
Tricia.
cool.
Nice to meet you.
I can't get my video to start. Apologies.
Okay, thank you, Tricia. Erica?
Hi, I'm Erica Ponder. I was invited to the meeting by someone off the commission board. I forgot her name. She sent me an email and she told me that today you guys had a meeting because I was inquiring about the board and to see if
Yes.
you guys had
Yeah,
any
that was
openings.
me. That
Oh,
was me,
okay. Hi.
Erica. Yeah, hi. Yeah, I'm the community involvement coordinator for EPA, and you just happened to email me today, and I was like, well, there's a meeting tonight, so welcome.
Welcome,
you.
Erica. I hope that the meeting wasn't too confusing and conglomerated. Welcome to the meeting.
Not all. Thank you for the warm welcome. I appreciate it.
Yes.
Okay, Bonnie, anything else? I got Joan's hand up, but anything from you before I take that?
I don't
I'm
think so.
good.
So are we having a May meeting?
May O&M report.
Okay, that sounds good to me. Just wanted to make sure because the
Okay.
CAG believes that they're trying to get rid of us and we didn't know if we were done yet. So we got one more meeting. Good. Thank you. Okay,
Okay.
Joni, what did you have to say?
Thank you, Bonnie. You interrupt anytime you feel like it. Don't even worry about me.
Tell
No,
my
I mean that
husband that.
positively. No, interject. I didn't mean interrupt. I just mean interject, absolutely. But
Okay.
Linda Kiefer, EPA, you're still there? I am very interested in that page that you just brought up. If you could bring it up just one more time and tell me the page number, and that was what you said is in the 5th 5-year review, EPA's decision about the PFAS. Could you bring that page that you just brought up, what you were presenting to the group? Yeah, beautiful. And so that's in your 5th 5-year review. Beautiful. What page is that?
It's in the
30
chat. It's page 35 to 36. And Meg put the link to this document. It is on the EPA webpage, www.epa.gov/superfund/
Thank you. Thank
Lowry
you.
dash
Yeah, I saw that.
landfill.
I apologize. I know we're cutting short here. The statement that's most of interest is the statement you've made here. And the reason that you are not concerned about any PFAS that you've chosen, which is PFOA, right?
We didn't
And
get one
you're
over the
sa-
other.
You said the EPA does not consider PFOA, PFAS to pose a risk at the site, because even if it is present at the site, there are no expected potential or existing completed exposure pathways. And that is the issue of the groundwater. Is that correct? So we don't have PFAS, et cetera, ever concerned about the soil and resuspension or et cetera. But I thank you again, and I will look at the 5-year review because the Haz Waste Division has determined that there are 2 that are considered hazardous. That's what you kept saying. The EPA, CDPHE has identified hazardous waste. I know Suncor right now, with the release of a combined outfall at Suncor on site, that they are now requiring PFAS to be reviewed, actually samples tested, because they had a surface water outfall, they had a stormwater outfall, and a discharge offsite. They're making them test it offsite Suncor. Suncor is not a Superfund site. It probably should be. We've got the same thing going on with the FBI agent that busted Rocky Flats, is concerned about the PFAS there. And nobody at EPA really wants to talk about it. But your statement here is extremely important because you said it does not pose a risk. And to use granulated active carbon filtration So that all requires an investigation that the community has not seen, but you've made this statement. Now, maybe that was part of your presentation when you gave them the draft of the 5 years. So that's all I wanted to see was
We
there
never
it
did give a
is.
draft of the 5-year review. It came out
Right.
as final. So
And you're
there's no
right.
draft.
You are right. That was really good, Linda. I'm glad you brought that up because now we're all wondering, why is it that EPA can produce a 5-year review and you say that you have at least had discussion with the community about the forthcoming 5-year review, and you've allowed them to submit comments. We didn't get the same thing happening with the Rocky Flats. But Linda, later on, I'll just contact you privately because I'm a little concerned about what you have just presented here, that you have absolutely said the reason that you do not test any exposure pathway off-site anywhere in that Superfund site as a potential risk or an exposure pathway. That's a very important thing for the community to understand. You've already made the decision. Why would you pay for anything?
So Joan, this last paragraph here, do you see it? The state of Colorado has offered the statewide grant program for PFAS. So what we look at in CERCLA is receptors. And so private wells are receptors. So the receptors in the area are being tested, had the opportunity to get tested for PFAS.
Okay, and we're really lucky for that. We appreciate that, Linda. But here is the bad point. EPA is going to wait until one of those wells does show contamination before EPA is concerned. That is scary to us.
That's a good point, and I'm concerned about what's on site. So I apologize.
I want to give
on
Bonnie,
site? What's
John,
on
I want to give
site?
Bonnie the last word on this.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Okay, I just had the last word. That's why we're concerned, is because they're going to wait until somebody's well is contaminated. We don't want to wait until somebody's well is contaminated to act. We want to start doing things now that prevent that, and that's our goal as a CAG. So I appreciate everybody's participation tonight. Thank you for trying to guide us through this, Mike. It was a hot issue, and we'll just have
My
to
favorite.
wait and see. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thanks. Thank you, Bonnie. Thanks, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Night.